Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We are back.
No, we're not. We're in Cairo, Egypt.
That is true. That is true. We're still here. It's our last day. It's also the end of our tour of 2022. And it was a great tour, yes?
Wonderful.
It
Beautiful.
was really, really great.
Really amazing.
It was great. I mean, everybody who came can really tell you, we had no bitching and no moaning and no complaining whatsoever. For a change, no divas in this group. But we saw, we say this
was
with a lot of
blessed.
love.
It was blessed.
It was truly a blessed journey. We had a different guide than last time because our guide, the guide that we always, ponder on to get him, he couldn't. So we were wondering who we were going to get, and we
Mohammed.
got some wonderful, wonderful person, really wonderful, who had his own spiritual insight into everything. So it was great.
Very
It was
calm.
really good.
Calm guy.
We're looking forward to Japan in March. Cherry blossom and everything about healing and everything about raising the gamma brain vibration. That's all I'm saying. But we want to dedicate. It's the ones of you who see our podcast, our video podcast on YouTube, go and check it out and like, subscribe, and share.
And why did we come to Egypt? Because this is our origins. This is really where we...
It's definitely an important origin. But for those of you who watch the podcast on our YouTube channel, please, I know it looks weird that we're coming from our bedrooms. I know it's a very, the only thing we're missing is an OnlyFans page or something, but this is how we live for me, at least for the last 20 years. This is my environment. For you, much longer, Foster.
Yes.
And
40 years.
we are flying home tonight. And
22 hours.
we're gonna be in a very different environment next time we see you, a place that we can call home for a certain time. And so we want to talk with you about sacred geometry and what it means for me and what it means for Foster, because we've been surrounded by sacred geometry, of course. You see, we talked about the pyramids and the randomness of how these places were built, and that there is nothing random about it, absolutely. You see? So the idea is, of course, that...
Here we're talking about pi. We're also talking about the Fibonacci series.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're in Egypt.
Absolutely.
Do you want to say
You're
anything
living
about
in
the
it. You're
golden
living in
mean,
it.
the
This
Fibonacci series?
Well, this is the idea that I want to bring in. A sacred geometry is usually a place that hosts something. It's not just a building or a place in no man's land that just randomly sits around and does stuff. I think that sacred geometry is something that creates is a host, a home of sort. And my guide always says to me, and he pinpointed it specifically to look at sacred places, its sacred geometry, as places where oversouls are being hosted. Now, the thing is this, an idea of an oversoul is, for me, a larger family, a soul family, if you want, because we are also individually always surrounded by about 10 to 15 souls, which come in and out. And these are our soul families. These are souls that have always experienced us. And usually, and this is how I want to say it, usually these are souls you never had a conflict with at any point in any incarnation. There's no rubbing, no grinding, no negativity. And they seem to be, when they're not incarnated in this or any other planetary constellation, or there's many universes, then they're kind of our soul companions, if you want. So...
But the oversoul is a much larger idea.
Much larger idea.
Because we're talking about the origins of our oversoul. That means the first incarnations on this planet from the stars.
Right.
For us, for our bloodline,
Yes.
comes through Egypt.
Right.
That's Osiris, that is, Atum and Nut and Geb.
And this is not the only place.
Tefnut, yes, Shu.
There are places in Peru and Bolivia and
India,
Nordic. Man constructed, you see. So we have to separate a little bit between
the
humanly
Aboriginal,
created
yes.
and naturally occurring, right?
Yes.
Because they exist as well. And these are waterfalls, for example. These are mountain areas. These can be also areas where doorways or gates where the energies fluctuate, and so there's a certain
Our oversoul goes back to Atlantis, but through the Egyptian quality.
right.
So that's
Right.
particularly ours.
Yes.
And most of the people that come on our tours
Yes.
have an oversoul from Egypt.
From Egypt, exactly.
And then they've been building over
This is exactly what
thousands of years.
This is exactly what my guide said in one of our last channels in the group, that you will always feel drawn to places, not even knowing why you feel so drawn to them, right? We have our tour guide Terry, who basically packed up her life and came and lived in Luxor, of all things. But the thing is that, let's stay in Egypt, that your oversoul is connected to a sacred geometric place where your oversoul family entered first.
your first ancestors.
Your first ancestry
like
is there.
Osiris and Isis and
And
Nephthys and Seth.
These are just terminologies we just,
Yes.
we very loosely we're going to use them because these are also humanly given, of course, to
Horus,
understand.
yes.
But Egypt has, as one example, a very important oversoul constellation, a sacred geometry, and that's, by the way, what sacred geometry is in the first place. Mandalas, mudras, all these constellations that we have, all these pyramids and buildings and temples. Sacred geometry is like a activator of codes. You start to download something or feel a certain way or sense something specific. And that's what sacred geometry does. It's a holder, like a chip, if you want, that you can insert in a certain moment. And to sense the knowledge or the data of this chip, you need to be in a very specific brainwave,
The gamma.
which is the gamma brainwave.
You also, when we meditate, the triangle that points up is the triangle that really comes from the earth and goes upward.
Right.
You understand? And that's what we call the serpent path.
Right.
Or
When you see
center of the
also,
earth.
when you look also at sacred geometry that is very commonly known as the pentagram or the hexagram, for example. Also the Star of David, of course, but a pentagram, for example. And please just leave the idea of it's a satanic symbol or anything, that can be said about everything, trust me. So the idea is that the pentagram, if the point goes up, it refers to sending something up. And the point of a sacred geometric...
the top point.
The point of a sacred geometric point, any point that shows up, right, that leads up, is a reference to the oversoul. We are not praying necessarily to the divine, but we are honoring a connection, even if it's subconscious, but a connection to the oversoul. And when we use a symbol down, like the pentagram, the upside
Facing
down,
down,
right? It's not demonic, it's not satanic, it's not evil.
It's coming down.
Don't be idiots, please. Stop it.
It's incarnating.
What it means is I'm downloading information from these oversoul areas.
Energies, yeah.
And so coming to places that you feel very, very drawn, and let's call them sacred geometric places or sacred places, they all have something mathematical. The way they're constructed, the way they're referring to a constellation in the sky, a planetary influence, that means that something higher is happening. It's not about here, it's about referencing something higher. And so there is not much said about the oversoul home, if you want.
But when you put the two tetrahedrons together, one facing up, one facing down,
Right.
then you have what we would call a six-pointed star.
Yeah.
And you have the integration of above and below.
But that is also the idea of the Merkaba.
Yes.
What is the Merkaba? The Merkaba is nothing but a active rotation of both consciousness, so to speak, and it is basically rotating mathematics. And when you rotate them, you have something very, very commonly known as a Tesla coil, for example. That's exactly what it is. It's not a complicated element.
No.
It's difficult to maintain it in that sense.
Visualize and
to
keep
visualize
it,
it, but it's definitely doable. No, that's not a problem.
And that's above, so below. Also
That's
the concept
exactly
that
what
you're
it
talking
is, as above, so below, and beyond. So it's interesting when I see people who, especially in our group, who felt they needed to come, or they said from all the tours that you're offering and everything that was offered in general, that was the one that called me, and that was the one in this moment in time, in this moment of the currents of what's happening out there in the world, right?
Well, when I was
But
first
they wanted
tested,
to come here.
When I was first tested in laboratories in Buffalo, New York, and a man who was a physicist was doing experiments on me, they found out that when I do my healing work, I go into a perfect Fibonacci series from my heart. It radiates from the heart. And so the Fibonacci golden mean is also the source of healing. And that has been proven now.
Right. I mean,
What would you say about Fibonacci? Because you also use that in meditations.
well, the idea is this, that if you see how a Fibonacci is really a spiral, it's really a spiral. It's also a reference to the black holes in our universe, which all rotate and don't let anything escape.
Or the Milky Way.
Or the Milky Way. Absolutely. So we see that this universal sacred geometric symbol applies to pretty much everything.
Yes.
Everything
Plants.
moves in that circle or in that cycle,
Shells,
so to speak.
yeah.
Exactly. Everything has seasons. That's also an element of sacred geometry. Everything has seasons. It begins, it has a middle point, a late point, and an end point in order to start again. Yeah. So there's always a form of these sacred sites that are geometric, sacred geometry for me are sites. Let me say something else because it comes up now. When you see periods, I think especially in the 80s, maybe 90s, the amount of crop circles that showed up, it was like, the real ones, because there was also people,
Faking it. Yeah.
faking it in the middle of the night with their tractor, but they're real ones, right? I think that for a certain time, these sacred geometric forms or sacred geometry communication of the oversouls would leave symbolism on our planet, like an imprint, so to speak. It is for me, it was a very non-dramatic way to prepare our minds for something that is coming. I think a lot of these phenomena that we have are preparations of not going into total madness and total shock when reality appears. And I want to think that this reality is the fourth dimensional or even fifth dimensional reality. Yeah,
Or
because
that
remember,
yeah.
time is an illusion.
Yes.
So time travel is nonsense. Okay.
Or that mathematics is the language of the universe.
Absolutely.
And that's how we will communicate.
That's exactly what it is. And I think that
Also through
spirit itself communicates through mathematical formulas.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Even through sound.
Absolutely. Because numbers are sounds and sounds are colors. I was just telling our group that because we talked about aura, and I said, listen, guys, an aura is not the static orb of various colors mixed together like a rainbow. Aura usually looks like smoke, colored smoke, and depending on your moods, that's how it manifests, at least to me. And I know people who are born this way, and they share.
There's a stable aura, and then there's one that's moving.
Exactly. I mean, they're called the primary and secondary aura. But the primary, which is the outer layer, takes a lot of time to change. And when it changes, it does either through a trauma, a shock, some people overdose, even that can be a way don't do it at home. You didn't hear it here. But that also can happen. But also what happens is through, if you can imagine that your experiences, any experience, and let's stay here spiritual, any metaphysical spiritual experience, rearranges the sacred geometric form in your cells and in your almost physiognomy. I know when Foster works on people, and that is now documented 1,000 times, he works on people, and when they get up from the mattress, they almost look rejuvenated. They look like scrubbed almost, I want to say, or even lifted sometimes, for which we charge extra, of course. No, it's not fair that some people get up and look better, but that's exactly what's happening. And to me, when I observe it, the geometric combination so to speak, harmonizes in a appropriate way. The appropriate way is a deeper connection to the oversoul connection. And so when we are more in alignment, especially with our soul family, which is about 150 souls, we would say, you travel at all times with this oversoul. And you prepare the sacred space for when you leave and when a new group of oversouls decides to take residency, so to speak.
Well,
And that is now the next generation
in-
and the next generation.
In Egypt, they have sechat, and sechat gives you a thread, and then you map out the naus, or the inner sanctum of your temple. Mm-hmm. And it's all in a sacred geometric layout.
Right.
So you take it and you measure. And you first do a square, you put the circle inside of the square, and then you build that altar. And then you're going to bring the boat in with a statue of the god. That's
Right.
how they did it in
Right.
their temples. And so, in a way, we are creating or meeting our own inner temples. I think that's very important for sacred geometry. Because when we talked about Greece, for instance, the actual geometry of the temple is the deity itself.
Right.
So the proportions of Athena's Acropolis is Athena. So when you entered into these temples, you were, in fact, meeting the archetype or the god or goddess through geometry. So sacred geometry is incredibly important because you're entering into the body of an archetype, a god, a being.
In my tradition, we look at sacred geometry as living entities,
Yes.
living beings, basically. You almost want to call them ancient apps. It's like in an app store, you're choosing the geometric forms that hopefully make something, do something to you, inspire you somehow, which is I think, very dominant in Buddhism when they make these mandalas out of colored sand,
Yes.
right? And the purpose is to make them, the patience to develop them. But I'm telling you, the people who are present and doing it, they're literally imprinting that mandala into their system. By the time they're finished, they invite everybody and say, have a look before we destroy it. And 5 minutes later, they destroy it. But
'Cause
that
it's in them.
imprint stays in them.
Yes.
It stays in them. There is not much said, at least to my knowledge, about sacred geometry as carriers of information, but also as carriers like data that can be mixed and matched, so to speak, to create a certain adjustment, I would like to call it, when it comes to connecting with spiritual alignment.
Well, some people see spaceships and discs. Well, one time we were in Aspen, we were sitting and lying down inside of some plants, and in front of us came a giant square. It was a perfect cube, and it just hovered above us. So you could see through the cube, you could see the cube, and then we had this revelation that even after you die, whatever, symbols, in fact, are living things. Cubes in sacred geometry are alive.
Are alive, yes.
And you interact with them as consciousness,
Yes.
as beings themselves. And also, these people in New Hope, Pennsylvania, they had carved into the side as kind of an art form of a sacred geometric form in the landscape. It was quite large, like Robert Long or something. They had quite a large spiral and something there. And spaceships would come to that geometry and
Absolutely.
see it
Yeah.
from the sky and be able to come right in front of you. So that was another experience.
Yeah.
So sacred geometry creates a field
Yes.
that lets things in, like in England around Silbury Hill.
Yeah, it does. It does for me also something more interesting, which when I went to England the first time and we went to crop circles
Right.
that popped up in the middle of nowhere, no one could duplicate them, because the thing is, in a fake one, you can feel the difference. Your electromagnetic field responds not as intense like a authentic one, but what I think in my observation over the last couple of decades, when it comes to sacred geometric buildings, crop circles, or simply natural formation that looks almost man-made, no? Deliberate, what happens is that, and that's the first thing that I think is important, it does two things. One, it does some preparatory work. It prepares two things, either for visitors to have a better landing point or an adjustment of energy so that they can
Maneuver.
show up
Yeah,
easier.
maneuver.
That's
Navigate.
it's like taking a fish out of water. You have to give it some kind of element to survive. But what crop circles, what temples do, wherever they are, they hold and stabilize any kind of electromagnetic fluctuation. So these sacred places that now exist, also the ones that are natural occurring, do something very interesting to the magnetic field of the Earth. It stabilizes it. Yet again, because of our constellations and our sun and our moon and all these other dynamics, we are bombarded with fluctuations. Sometimes, not as intense and sometimes really strong, but that's what these places do. They seem to hold an energy. That's why you go to the pyramids, you go to Dendera, you go to Edfu, and you feel that there is this thousands of year old building made for the future, holding some energy.
Anchoring it.
It's anchoring it, it stabilizes it, and by that provides stability to the overall
Of the whole planet.
of the whole planet.
Because you
I
do
totally
feel
see
connected
this.
to the whole planet here, just because of the sacred
Yes.
geometry.
You feel
as
very
if it is like
global.
a communication device.
You feel very global here, to say it this way. But the other thing is also when you see at Nazca lines. When I saw Nazca lines the first
and walk
time,
them, yes.
you've been there, right?
Yes, and walk them.
I just saw them. I was close enough
ceremony
when we
there.
went to Peru, but I wasn't there. But when I looked at them, documentaries and film and pictures, it looks to me like a preparation of energy for something to have an easier arrival point. Let's just say it this way. I don't want to say for the UFO to see it and fly in. It's less about you can land here, and it's much more about there is an energy that is stabilized. There is a field, an electromagnetic field, which makes it our arrival much more smoother, much more undramatic, and much more also harmonizing with the electromagnetic field.
And when you walk the Nazca lines, when you actually get on the ground and you walk them, they start to buzz. And when you are inside of a crop circle, they also have quite an energetic quality that's kind of buzzy. You know, when you see the lights above it, and then the first crop circle is made and then you run there,
Right.
you still feel something is still leaving the imprint.
Well, the phenomenon,
In the air.
the phenomenon of light and sacred geometric places, or sacred places too, is given. It's a
Well,
common
I
thing.
was always
right?
taught you have to walk the Nazca lines. You don't watch them from the air,
Right.
though that's the only way you can see
Right.
them. You come down and you walk them.
Well, the other thing.
It's
the
an
other
initiation. As
absolutely.
You walk.
The
And you
other
can cross dimensionally.
Yeah. The other thing I believe, again, I observed how people's energy respond to sacred geometry. There is always a shift. I can guarantee you, always a shift. What the shift does first, that any symbol, no matter what it is, what tradition, what it does is it removes a blockage. It says there is a belief or a pattern that just doesn't make sense here. And if you want me to enter your system, we have to extract this blockage that always comes with an illness, a flu, a headache, something happens to your system, which is very much in the nature of a homeopathic remedy, right? You take the remedy, if it's the right one, it gets all worse, and then it all gets better at once. But you get into the root, so to speak. And sacred geometry works very similar to that idea.
You know, words sometimes can be a form of sacred geometry. I was once at the Church of Inner Light, which is quite a beautiful church of Della Reese, who's since passed on, but she was quite a lady. And she invited me to speak at this church in Los Angeles. And they have healers in every corner while you're speaking, and they come out and they do a sacred geometric form around the audience, which is about more than 100 people, and maybe more than 200, and they are sending energy and they're doing healing work. And as you're speaking, you feel a complete download, like a sacred geometric in words. And the words that come out of your mouth is definitely not what prepared for this group of people. It just starts to flow. And you just start to say things. The same thing happened in this incredible cathedral in England, where they have a whole center, and you go there and you sit at the high altar and you just start speaking. And something speaks through you. You get covered with a huge amount of light, like I don't know how to say this, like a waterfall of light, and then you just start speaking the geometry to the people. And it's not geometry, you can't just say that, but the words themselves are very fascinating because it's not what you want to say, it's what they want to transmit. And you feel like a transmitter in that moment.
That's what it is.
In a sacred geometric place, like a cathedral or a church.
You see, if we step out a little bit of the understanding of channeling, when we channel, when we transmit data, information, and we like the idea to think that we're channeling God, the goddess, always somebody out there, the archangels and so on. Well, I think what is interesting from my perspective, and I want you guys to just listen to it and think about it and research and do your own research and then find again, and don't just sit and listen and take this for granted, but this is my experience. Every oversoul family has a leader. Has a leader. That means it is one master or one ascended leader among who is like a motivator, we would say a coach today,
Yes.
and prepares for the experience in those various places. This is not the only place where sacred geometry exists. I mean, there is really unlimited, right, experiences. And my guide very funny said once, he was, and I didn't know in what was he referring to, but I was very much into Merkaba. And so I tried to understand the Merkaba and, the frustration when it's given in half ways, right? It's like, do this, do that, and then, well, now you have to be, faithful enough and it will come. I mean, it's a little hokey.
Yeah.
But the idea is that my guide started to talk about Superman and Batman and Fantastic Four. And I said, either you're drunk, 8 billion guides, I got the broken one. But he said, this is what you call the Marvel family, the Marvel, help me, DC
Yes.
Comics, right? The superheroes, the ascended Doctor Who and Doctor Strange and all this. These are simple memories of connections to our leaders in the oversoul groups. They are what we would call Supermans. They are super beings in that
Or
sense.
ascended beings.
Or ascended. And what makes you a Superman or Superwoman, by the way, is a complete limitless experience. There's not one limit in your experience, and that's what makes you super.
You
So
say yes to everything.
you say yes to, we're going to say that, you see, and that is the idea that these masters have trickled in our pop culture into the consciousness and subconsciousness of society as superheroes. That's why people are so obsessed with them. The Spider-Man idea. We're looking at these. He always forces me to watch these stupid movies, and I can't even tell at the end what I watched. But
Doctor Strange is based on Apollonius of Tyana.
Tyana, exactly.
So they're based on very specific people.
Knowingly or not, I am convinced that a lot of these superhero ideas are a reference to Atlanteans, Titans, Nephilims, and so on, but also that they are representing our concept or understanding from a spiritual and soul point of a over soul leader. That is the idea.
And the fact that when we were in this Osiris temple, and we all felt there is somebody extremely tall buried underneath the Osirium.
The Osirium is super
with their
important.
ship or whatever. So there's a lot of metal down there.
Because it is all silvery.
And that could be our ancestor.
Absolutely. That
A Nephilim.
under the Osirium, which, by the way, when the temple was built, the temple is called
Abydos.
Abydos. When the temple was built, they were building and building, had all planned out. While they were building, they hit this Osirium. The Osirium is much older than Abydos. So they had to build around it, so to speak. It's like when we dig, a parking space and or parking lot, and they're hitting on ruins. That's mostly in Europe, of course. That doesn't happen in America. In America, people think frozen yogurt is culture. But that's what happens when you find something really old, when already something old is built on top of it. And when I looked at it, and the Osirium is very important because it has a very famous sacred geometric symbol, which is the flower of life.
It does.
And it's multiple versions of it there, by the way. It's not just one.
Like a tattoo on the wall.
Like a tattoo.
Not a hieroglyph.
Like a tattoo on the wall. And so, for me, the flower of life is a footstep. Yeah? So where you walk on the sand with your sneakers or your feet, you leave a footprint. To me, it looks like a footprint of some sort. But when I look at the Osirium and I just tune into the energy, it's completely silver. And silver is not a color in the aura, it is a liquid metal almost. It's like gold for me, is not static. It doesn't just sit there like paint. It is very moving, and so it always indicates something not of this world.
Yes,
in that sense.
Or the medicine wheel when you go to Wyoming, this huge medicine wheel that everyone, brings their prayer sticks to. It's quite extraordinary, the pilgrimage. And you get there, and again, you are in a place where there is a myth about a ship coming down,
Right.
and putting their legs into the ground or whatever, and creating this medicine wheel in a circle. And then people go there, but a medicine wheel is much more than that. And it is something that truly balances us at the whole universe.
A medicine
of course,
wheel
it's a circle
is a sacred
of the divine.
geometry.
Yes.
It's a sacred site. You can make it basically in your living room because it's a circle with a
Yes.
with a
With the directions.
with the directions.
Like in any ritual.
Any ritual, absolutely.
And then Native Americans dance, remember, also planetary configurations, and they are in fact in their dances creating a kind of geometry
That's what they do.
with the sound, with
That's
the
what they
dance,
do.
everything, and then you're in the center of it.
To activate and or replicate a certain vibrational match that hopefully opens gates, open doors, because that's what sacred geometry,
Balances.
and that's what sacred doors and sacred places and sacred foundations, I want to say, even the ones that we don't see, which are like in the water, for example, it doesn't always have to be visible for us.
And then you have the Platonic solids, right? You have basically the triangle, right? That it's a tetrahedron, and it represents fire as an element. And then you have icosahedron representing water.
Right.
And then you have dodecahedron representing more ether.
Right.
And you have these progressions.
I learned that these are the geometric forms of our soul, like our DNA. The spiraled strain with balls around it. That is our sacred geometric formulation of our existence, of our life. And these Platonic forms are in combination. They are the fabric of our souls.
Which is an incredible thing to always meditate on and contemplate.
Absolutely.
The building blocks of the elements as well.
I think a very important meditation, if I can bring this in and inspire you, is to, first of all, everybody can meditate with closed eyes. The concept is here, and the higher form of meditation is with eyes open. With eyes open, we learned this in Japan with Zen meditation, where they don't close their eyes necessarily. You have to look at something and focus on it and not move your body.
It's a form of mindfulness.
It is
temple practice.
It is mindfulness. It is temple practice, that's for sure. But what it does is that it allows you to absorb and become and the contemplation. So when you meditate with a Platonic solid, right? You can buy them online, by the way. It's
and crystalline form too.
Absolutely. You can buy them and have them as your meditative tool. You sit, you breathe down, you relax, you center your system, and you start to build a gamma brainwave, which is only an emotional way to do that. You can only achieve it with emotion. And once you're there, you open your eyes. If you have closed them, you open your eyes, and then you just focus on that solid, so to speak, and become it. You enter it, you become it, you let it speak to you, And by that also you stimulate a lot of spiritual skills, clairaudience, clairvoyance, clear writing, all these clear, right, qualities are being polished, activated, and harmonized with each other. Because the goal is, of course, when you go into mediumship, especially, that you can see it, hear it, feel it, and touch it. Not just, I heard something that was in my head, and hopefully it's not my own brain, because we know, you know that what we always say, spirit will never, ever speak in negativity or entertain a negative thought that you have. So all these crazy mediums out there, and I say this carefully, during COVID, who had these channels about spirits, who worried about vaccines and worried about politics and had political opinions, that was all BS. You got played big time. And if you followed that, you're an idiot. We still love you. But when you are in a completion, really in a completion of your own ability and your skill, and it's harmonized, what comes through will always benefit you and the world around you. There is no error, there is no gap to allow a negativity or a misunderstanding to take place, because you really, and this is when I look at people that I admire and they're of a certain age, and they get older and they say, I don't care about anybody anymore. I don't care what people think or don't think or feel. These kind of people are in a dangerous, wonderful place of being completely connected to their sacred geometry, to the closest, I want to say, the closest possible way to their original blueprint is the word, yes.
The original self.
That's the idea.
You see, Christos, when I first went to Mount Kailash, and Mount Kailash for me was very important, that I had to get there. And we know that the entrance to Shambhala is very close to Mount Kailash. And you circumambulate the mountain. But there's a temple there. There's quite a few things there. No one knows, again, what their origins are. Supposedly Shiva, or it's, everybody has different ideas. But as you're going around and you're circumambulating the mountain, it is a giant skull.
Yeah.
And you are circumnating the higher mind. And you are, in fact, going into a kind of trance around a sacred geometric symbol. Like the Kaaba in Mecca, you're going around a cube. And you're circling a cube that has, of course, a Levantine corner with a asteroid in it. And they are turning around something that is original for them. This asteroid brought something. Some new knowledge.
It broke through something.
Yes.
You see, yes.
And they honor it in the way that they move around it and the way that they pray around it. Same thing around Mount Kailash, which activates also things in your own brain, from the pineal gland to the pituitary to the top of your head, like a 3-4-5 Pythagorean triangle.
When we look at rituals of the old days, and we take them literal and word for word, and we follow them word for word, like the Abramelin ritual, for example, one of the most important elements is that Abramelin, for example, demands that you spend a long time alone in a room or in a place of solitude, almost surrounded by sacred geometry, be it the circle or being a circle with inscriptions about prayers or the names of God, and so on and so on. But that is also a form of sacred geometry. A circle where you write something in becomes a sacred geometric imprint. Yeah, and Masao Emoto, of course, genius, who basically took a positive term and a negative term, put it on water vials, froze them, then had them photographed, and so the positivity will always create something beautiful. The geometric forms of these ice crystals were always beautiful and complete and healing, where the negative one always looked like cancer or tumors or deformed. So there is your visuality, geometry, basically, you see.
And you were talking about, I'm talking about Kailash because to me it's a skull as well. And we talk about crystal skulls. And what is the connection between the oversoul and the entrance into the crystal skull?
Well, the idea for me was always in my research that I understood the legend of the 13 skulls, right?
Right, in a circle.
As the 13 overlords.
Yes.
That's how I would call them, who were transcended, and they represented the idea of
The knowledge of Atlantis.
the knowledge of much, much more than
More
just
and
Atlantis. We're talking about planetary knowledge and universal knowledge, because as the way I understood it, and that how I was told, is that the emerald tablet, or the concept of
Taught.
Tot, right, who brings knowledge to people and informs them, that an equivalent to that could be the authentic crystal skull idea that will activate within a circle, which is again a sacred geometric form, but then also through a specific sound frequency, which is for me C sharp.
C sharp, using gamma meditation.
Right.
You have to
In
reach
other
gamma
words,
brain waves
when you
to C
enter
sharp.
a circle like this and you are in a pissy mood, you basically atomize yourself. That is the idea. You cannot enter with a flaw. And I think that what these skulls represent, the way I understood it, and the way I've been initiated into the knowledge of it, is that the person or the persons who reach a level of complete resistance freedom without conflict with themselves and the world, so to speak, they will be chosen, or they are able to enter a pure circle like that. That is the idea. There was a very funny, I remember, I just saw it once because it was so terrible, but it was one of those last Indiana Jones where Kate Blanchett is obsessed with the crystal skull. There's only one, but they have to bring it into a room with the circles, and she goes in and she basically explodes because, she's not in the
Right, pure frequency.
Frequency, exactly. And so I think that those that we call ascended masters reached a level of that kind of complete freedom and independence from an outer opinion or an outer influence.
And everybody is connected to an ascended master.
Yes.
And they're not
Yes.
the usual ones that we hear about. Like Saint Germain
No.
or
No.
Hilarion
No.
or
No. They,
It's much more.
No, the idea is that Enoch is one of the first
human beings.
man-made
Right.
overlord, because that's his story. He was a human, got it, transcended, and became this scribe of God, so to speak. But what it really represents for me is that he was able to reach a level of bliss, I would call it, and a level of acceptance. And I'm gonna tell you what I think it is, because it came up so often the last days, that he could really become for me, one of the first human overlords, right? And one of the master teachers of souls in that level. We had a funny experience in my last channel, and I had to listen to it, and it just stayed with me because my guide said, in all of this, it is important that you learn the power of a very powerful spell, and that spell is the word yes. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. So we heard this a lot, that when you say yes, you accept. When you say yes, you don't feel the need to power through something,
No.
to be aggressive with something. When somebody says, listen, I don't love you anymore and I want to leave you and I want a divorce, instead of crying, and just say yes.
Or someone passes
Yes.
and go to the other side. Or when you think too small and you're only thinking about your little world and you're always in your own head,
Say yes.
say yes to something
Say yes,
huge,
because at
greater.
least you're not battling the smallness, that
Say yes
apparent
to it
smallness.
all, to
So
break out.
say yes to it all, which is such a challenge, I think, being a human being. But the idea is,
Because the spiritual world says
Spirit-
yes to us.
because
to us.
spirit doesn't want us to resist. But when we say that's right and that's wrong, we are going into a resistance, and then we're trying to tell people to agree with what we think we feel, because we need agreements. When you need agreements, you are not on a spiritual path.
No.
That's the idea. When you need people to tell you how much they love you, how much they need you, how much value you have, then you're not on a spiritual path. I make it very simple here. So the idea is, of course, the way I understood, the moment you look at something, let's call it negative, or something happens, instead of battling it, doubting it, fighting it, feeling guilty, shame, sin, and so on, what we've been told,
Say yes to it.
say yes to it. Okay, I say yes to it. I take responsibility for it because that's what yes means. And when we say yes to it, no matter how difficult it is, you basically don't fight the experience, you don't resist the experience, and through that, and that's what I understood is that the word yes, the way we connect it to a meaning, of course, that the word yes represents a restoring quality of our own sacred geometry. In other words, it's a soul healer, right? And I was waiting for this big revelation because when I channel, I'm usually zoomed out, and all I heard was yes, 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 yes.
Because
yes.
the
I thought there must
spiritual
be something
world
else.
says yes to everything that we do.
Exactly.
So instead of judging
And
us or
that's
trying to guide us or whatever, they say yes
yes.
to us.
And that's why we say, how can God allow this to happen? How
Yes.
can the Lord allow this to happen? How did Spirit allow this? Why did the universe allow this to happen?
The Spirit is always saying yes.
Because a spirit, no matter what we want to call it, and no matter in what shape and form we give it, it says yes. Because can you imagine what it would be if spirit would resist us? We love you, but that's the
No.
Christian idea. That's a Christian idea.
It's absurd.
God says, do what I say, obey only to me, or else I will burn you in the hells of fire and let you atomize and be in pain for the rest of eternity. But I love you. But I love you. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. If you believe that you are being tested, I feel sorry for you. Because I can guarantee you there is no test. There is no test. I looked for it because I thought, is this a test? You know what I mean? Am I meant to pass something here? Am I meant to endure something here or prove that how well I can deal with pain or something? No, it's not. There is no test, right? It's like when a guy says to a woman, I really like you. I just have to get up tomorrow really early. Trust me, he's not into you. Because a man will try to get into pants, male or female. They will make it happen no matter what day they're. The same thing is this idea.
You know, every time I'm with a shaman and we see a stone with two spirals on it, for instance, a petroglyph, the shamans will always put their hands right there. They'll put their fingers in as a battery. And they'll say, this is negative, positive charge. This is a battery. One spiral spirals inward, one spiral spirals out. One is one galaxy, one is a kind of mirror reflection of that galaxy. And you put your hands in and you, in essence, vibrate to those frequencies and you become like a battery. You charge up. And I've watched many shamans do that.
Yeah. But this is what, for me, represents sacred geometry. It's what happens within your energy, within your cells, within your consciousness. There's a realignment of shape and form. And we could say that every mandala we see is basically a artistic depiction of soul creation.
Absolutely.
And you just never see really ugly mandalas.
Well, you see it in petroglyphs because you have a human figure and she's very large and pregnant, but inside of her is all sacred geometry and a mandala inside of her belly.
The nice thing about these temples is when you go to a temple of Hathor or Nun, you see a depiction of the goddess on the ceiling, and she always has her hands stretched out, and our guide
surrounding
said,
you.
Stand underneath the feet, she will bless you. She's kind of right. That's exactly what happens, you see, because you're not just walking in a temple in Egypt, you're walking into a book.
Well, there's the oversoul, because it is like an oversoul, and she has all the souls inside of her.
That's exactly what it is.
It's all stars,
That's
and
exactly
we are the
what it
stars.
is. That's exactly what it is. I think that these are depictions of facts of the knowing, of the deeper knowing of our older civilizations. And I tell you, they had technology and they had knowledge compared. We live in the dark ages here. Yeah.
We're not technologically there of our ancestors.
And that's
yet.
why I always recommend, to some degree, also to pick up a stone or a crystal, right? Because that's what crystals do. They respond to sacred geometric form or to geometry anyway. And in a circle they can recharge, in a square they can unload, in a triangle, they can send energy, any energy you send, by the way. So it depends what shape you build with a crystal. That's exactly what they do.
Absolutely. You can create metaforms. Like you always create in a pyramid inside of the house.
Yes.
And we have large pyramids, small pyramids, and we put a lot of things underneath the pyramids as well. We also create our own little Egyptian pyramid with the different
But
netters.
we want to repeat, unless we didn't say it, but I want to remind, in case we did, a pyramid will sanctify a place. It makes it into a temple. So in a temple place, that means when you bring a pyramid into your house and you align it correctly, you basically spiritualize the house or the office. So don't expect
And the land around you, too.
don't
We have
expect
them
big
outside.
money flow to happen here.
No.
So don't align the pyramid with the sides, align them with the corners. I feel that this is a much better, also we had a much better result like this, because we like pyramids and we have them around, but oh my God, it was like we were living in a monastery basically, you know. So you want to consider always and look at sacred geometry. What does it do? What does it do? A pyramid creates the sacred geometric form of ascension. There is no business quality or money quality or anything in it. It is the higher quality of finances or success or love, so to speak. So it does amplify a connection. Also, these big pyramids that we have, right? Where
Yes.
we have literally
sit in
our
them,
we sit in them. They're called ascension pyramids. So what it means is you want to replicate the process of how we go back into our soul families and meet our soul leader to some degree.
Absolutely. There are many things to say about sacred
I mean, we
geometry.
could go on and on, but we wanted to
It's
give you
quite
really an
extraordinary.
insight, a very fresh insight, because we are literally looking out at Cairo at the moment, and it's-
Pyramids. We're looking at
pyramids. I mean, we're looking at it,
tetrahedrons.
but it is again how important that these places exist naturally also in the world, right? The Bermuda Triangle is one.
Which
Mount
supposedly
Shasta
is an
is
underground
one.
pyramid from Bimini.
Exactly. I find these places very often around mountains.
Yes.
I remember meeting you
Or caves.
in Arizona, and I spent some time with you there at the beginning of our relationship, and I just didn't know what to make of it, because I was, everybody was
Very.
telling me about the amazing spiritual
Very.
energy. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it. I didn't see it. And again, I didn't know, am I not tuning into it or something? And then for some reason, we heard about a little spiritual store in Flagstaff, right? So we went out there, and the closer
San
we went,
Francisco peaks. Yeah.
the closer we drove there, I said, "Oh my God, look at all the energy
The
there."
Kachinas, the spirits who
And
live there.
that was that's for me the real power place. So if you guys are in Sedona and
For
you
the
say,
Hopi too.
we don't get it, go out there. It was for me the most strongest power place up there. So there's real energy up there.
And sometimes the Kachinas are spirits, extraterrestrial, sometimes they're thought forms.
Right.
So
right.
they're all sorts, they could be an egregore. So there's different kinds.
Or
Yes, some
we
show up
have
later.
man-made, like Tennessee, right? The temple to Athena.
In Nashville,
Nashville,
Tennessee, they
Tennessee.
have a temple. to
I thought it's a joke. It's not. It's a full replica in its original,
in the right
form.
proportion.
in the right proportion, in
On
the
a ley
right,
line.
with a 7-foot tall Athena in there,
Much taller.
or much taller. I'm telling you, there is a sacred geometric formation here, because the
All over
Acropolis,
America, yeah.
the Parthenon, was built with exact mathematical
Like the cities, like many things.
same idea.
With an obelisk
with
from
an obelisk.
Egypt. All of them wanted
Exactly.
obelisks.
Look how many things were given away, gifted away, mostly stolen, of course, away.
And
England give back the marbles to Greece, but that's just a side note.
Well, an obelisk with a temple underneath is fully charged.
Absolutely, and that's what you see a lot with older
the
places. And newer places built, a temple is built on another temple, it's on another temple, it's on another temple. So we honor places for some reason. We recognize that people used to build places with such knowledge and such understanding of energy and shape and form and mathematics, of course. That's what we call a Kabbalistic language. It is the understanding of color, of elements, of numbers, and shape and form, and we speak in that form. It is a
That's what we're
emotional language, and that is the highest form of sacred geometry. That is what we call also creational language.
And you have that also with Native Americans. They
yeah.
have the higher language, or even the Hawaiians when they speak the high language. You know, the noble, the royal languages. The royal languages usually are to divinity.
Right, right.
Same thing in Egypt. I'm sure there was a higher language as well, like the way you speak Enochian or the way we speak High Egyptian here
Right.
when we're doing a ceremony.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we just wanted to give you a little, our last Egypt insight. We didn't know it was going to turn into a 3-part, but that's a little bit what it is. But we want to really focus on the energetic aspect of Egypt, not only, but also the places we already visited in
They
Peru
found
and so on.
Egyptian artifacts, of course, in the Grand Canyon. They found
Right.
Atlantean artifacts in different caves all over the world.
Right.
And where those things went is another
And we
story,
do
but
kn-
we
and-
know that they went some.
And we
to
do know
libraries.
that the Egyptians used to travel, were a seafaring people, and
Yes.
we know about it because you find hieroglyphs in the middle of Australia.
Yeah.
You know, they're there. You know, they're there.
And they live in
telling
England.
a story of two brothers two brothers who traveled to a place for contemplation, like a spiritual journey. So basically, people went back and scouted the scriptures of Egypt and found these two brothers and their dynasty and their family connection. And of course, if you still believe that Columbus was the first in America,
absurd.
you're really being kept in the dark, because we find Viking and Nordic artifacts
And
all over the
native
place.
peoples were
And
there.
native people, there is clearly a connection between South American
Oh yes.
Mayans and
Mayans
Aztec.
are timekeepers.
Absolutely, and
Hopi
there
are
is
space
clearly
keepers.
reverence and historic reference, and
Mayan Hopi. Time,
that
space.
they met, they traveled, they met, they pilgrimaged, and they connected with people and exchanged knowledge.
You know what is very fascinating in Egypt? While we're talking, are all these birds flying right next to our window?
There was nothing all day, but here they are now. Yeah,
And when we go to temples, we were at the Great Pyramid, and there was a hawk circling the pyramid.
right.
A minute we came out, and no one, not our guide, no one had ever seen that before. And then we had different hawks circling us, and then we have skates, these little birds that fly around, like Isis and Nephthys, and like Horus, who's the hawk. And, in astral travel, they shapeshift into birds, and they go. And we feel them always around, the messengers. And they do a kind of sacred geometry in the sky, even though they're following the currents.
Yes.
They circle pyramids, and there's something very powerful about that, and they activate it when you're in there.
Yeah.
So there's also nature very engaged in the geometry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything.
We witness that
Everything moves and breathes in sacred geometric form.
together.
Absolutely. Just look into the sky when you see a flock of birds flying in formations and flying in shapes and forms. They can replicate the form like no one taught them how to do it. They just know how to do it.
Like at Abu Simbel, they were making forms in the air, all the flock of birds. They were constantly moving.
Absolutely.
And we were all watching them for quite a while.
Yeah. It was fascinating. We had really experiences, I have to say. Really experience, but that also because we approached the place with such gratitude and such appreciation, and literally we said yes to everything. Do you want to do this? Yes.
Well, we were on the top of a Mayan pyramid, remember, in the Yucatan on December 21st, 2012.
Don't ask how we did it.
We were there with these shamans, and they were doing a big ceremony, and we were all there meditating. It was a very large group. And then when we left, that was this moment. We went, I don't know, to a beach. We all went to some beach. I don't know, it was like 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and there were, I don't know, a restaurant full of people, all of them dancing and singing at 5:30, 6 in the morning in Mexico, like it was the middle of the day. And so our group just got caught up in it, and we started celebrating, started dancing with all these Mexicans. And then we went out to the beach, and in that moment, everybody had a kind of revelation,
Yes.
a kind of joy, a kind of yes moment. They said yes to the universe, and that was it.
The group that came then, for me, in retrospect, the group, each one of them came to that moment. We were one of the I think we were the only group that made it to the top of a pyramid at that day, at that moment, because they had shut down for the reasons
Yes.
of fear of terrorism and the crazies and the nutniks, basically. But they didn't allow anyone near a pyramid. But Terry, our tour guide, who we
Got us
trust,
there.
she got us to a place in the middle of, I don't know where she found this place, but we would climb this Mayan pyramid in the
Beautiful.
middle of the night, in the dark.
For the sunrise.
It was amazing. And when the time frame showed up, it has a different significance for me, which I will not go into. But when the time showed up, the people who were there because they all connected with their soul family overlords in that sense.
Yes.
You know, let's call it this idea, with their ascended leaders. And that is what happened in that moment.
And it was a timeless moment because when we went to the beach, everybody burst out laughing.
Yeah.
At one moment. I mean, it's quite a lot of people. And they all felt it like a shift in their awareness.
Yeah.
They said yes to life, yes to the universe.
Yes. And that is the magic word we want to leave you with. It's yes. We say yes to,
Yes to everything.
We say yes to everything and yes to life.
Yes to each other.
It does not mean accept negativity by saying yes to it. It says you say yes, I will not tune into this because I say yes to who I am and what I am, and that is a huge sacred geometric shield, if you want, that is created around you. Just think about it. We want to leave you like this because next time, I'm so happy, we're going to not come from you from a bedroom. We promise we will avoid the bedroom. Okay, it's getting a little slippery now because people say, what is this with these bedrooms all day? That's what we're getting, people. But we're going to come from you from Las Vegas, Summerlin, our new home, and wish us luck because tonight we fly a long, long, long flight. So when I arrive in the States, probably somebody will get killed, or something will happen. But I say yes. I love it. I say yes, and I'm desperate already, but I say yes. But this is our journey that is showing up now. Our journey comes to an end for 2023, 22. Oops, that was a Freudian slip.
And we've been in so many pyramids.
I mean, we've been
We're
truly
speaking the language of
and
hieroglyphs.
and also we want to
images.
tell you, we've been in sacred geometric forms in every workshop during the year, in every meeting, in every
ritual.
in every conversation
Song,
we had,
dance.
even the virtual ones. What we create and we anchor stability, and we bring stability to sacred geometric energy. We stabilize, we anchor this energy and provide a little bit to the stabilization of the fluctuations of the electromagnetic field.
Absolutely.
And the more we provide this energy,
That's what we're doing.
and please do the same thing. You help the ascension of this planet and everyone on it, if they
Just
like
gonna
it
happen
or not.
anyway.
Yes.
And you have to go along with it. That's actually
Absolutely.
the period we're living in.
So we say yes.
Say yes to life.
Until we meet again, guys.
And the metamorphosis.
Absolutely. We say goodbye. See you again in a couple
See you
hours. Take care. Be well. Until we meet again. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.